All right. Well, welcome to Roots of Reality Experiences. I'm joined by Dr. Michael Shermer, who is the publisher of Skeptic magazine, a presidential fellow at Chapman University, host of the popular podcast, The Michael Shermer Show, and the Skeptic Substack weekly columnist. Additionally, in the past, for 18 years, he was a monthly columnist at Scientific American and is the author of several New York Times bestselling books, including Why People Believe in Weird Things, The Believing Brain, and The Moral Arc. Lastly, he has also just written a new book called Conspiracy: Why the Rational Believe the Irrational. So, Dr. Shermer, thanks for coming on today.
Nice to see you. Thanks for having me.
So, I have many questions about your book, but before we get into that, I'm just curious, how did you first get interested in studying and researching conspiracy theories?
Oh, well, the topic is pretty much in our wheelhouse of Skeptic magazine. Here's what the magazine looks like.
Yeah.
It's right there is my late partner, Pat Lindsay, who co-founded the magazine with me. It's a quarterly publication, Skeptic Society. We're a 501c3 nonprofit science education. And our wheelhouse would be like pseudoscience, pseudohistory, alternative medicine, quackery, cults, conspiracy theories, science and religion, science and morality, pretty much anything where you want to know, is it true? In the case of conspiracies and conspiracy theories, these are two different things. There are conspiracies in the world. There are, by definition, two or more people plotting in secret to do something to a third party or another organization to gain an unfair, illegal, or immoral advantage. That happens all the time. So the question then becomes a kind of a signal detection problem. Applying the tools of science and rationality to trying to figure out whether something's true or not, which we do with, the theory of evolution versus creationism, or Big Bang skeptics, or climate skeptics, or Holocaust deniers, or whatever, vaccine skeptics. So we kind of specialize in evaluating claims, and conspiracy theories are a kind of claim about, X is happening to Y. All right, is that true? And sometimes it is. This isn't like perpetual motion machines or psychic power, which can't be true because it would violate all laws of physics as we know them. So, but these do happen, right? So the question is the particular one you're interested in, is that actually true? So my book really starts there and kind of presents ideas of how to evaluate those kinds of conspiratorial claims.
Sure. So when you were growing up, did you ever think that you would go on to be writing books about conspiracy theories and all these societal beliefs?
Well, growing up, no, I was just a sports kid and just, having fun. I got interested in science though through science fiction. I was a big Star Trek fan and Isaac Asimov fan and so on. And to me, it seemed like there was something compelling about that. So when I went to college, I took a course in astronomy, and it's like that was an eye opener. And because Star Trek had something to do with astronomy, right? So I kind of went down that path and took philosophy and psychology and whatnot as a general education. Ended up majoring in psychology and experimental psych, and then history of science. And all along, I was always interested in the kind of margins of science. When I was in graduate school, in the 70s, UCLA had a lab for studying paranormal. Thelma Moss was the head of this lab, Kirlian photography and ESP and psychokinesis. And, they were using experimental methods to test whether these things are true or not. I thought, wow, okay, well, what do I know? I mean, maybe there's something to this. And my professor, Doug Navrick at Cal State Fullerton, he was very skeptical of this. Interestingly, he's much more open-minded to that than I am now. And I thought there might be something to it. But then, as I started the magazine in 1992 with Pat, it was pretty evident that most of these claims were not true. And that then the question became well, why do people believe them if they're not true? And that led me to my first book and all this kind of the psychology of belief, right?
Yeah.
You want it to be true, so you employ the confirmation bias and the hindsight bias and the my side bias and all these different cognitive biases that compel you to find evidence to support what you already believe. And this is certainly the case with conspiracy theories. Once you have one, it's easy to find evidence for it, even if it's just anomaly hunting, like with JFK or 9/11, or the rigged election of 2020. conspiracy theory. That's not true. You can always find some weird anomaly, like, oh, what's that video at 2 a.m, people bringing in these boxes into this voting precinct building? There's something suspicious there. If you think there's something up, you can find evidence for it. The problem is that it may not be evidence. So, how do you evaluate evidence? How do you know something is true or not true? And that's what we do.
Yeah, I mean, it's a super important field to develop when it comes to being skeptical of all these beliefs in the world, which seem like they're an endless amount of beliefs that are popping up all the time in different countries. And I just feel like for a lot of people, I know when I first came across your work, I think I was in high school and I was just watching a YouTube video that you did a TED Talk on why people believe weird things. And I was thinking to myself, like, wow, so I'm not alone when it comes to people thinking this is odd that people believe in this stuff. And I think for a lot of people that means a lot, because it's kind of like, okay, so, you're not necessarily the person that's an outcast, because there's lots of other people that are also skeptical of what's going on and the various beliefs in the world. So definitely really cool to come across, Skeptic magazine and all the work that you're doing. Now, when it comes to conspiracy theories and your new book, Conspiracy, I know you've covered conspiracy theories for a while, but what led you to write this new book?
Really, the rise of conspiracism in the internet age. It's made it much less fringy and more mainstream through the speed with which conspiracy theories can spread in a community, the numbers of people it can reach overnight, millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions, and how dangerous they can be when people act on their beliefs. So, largely, like in say in the 60s and 70s, JFK conspiracy theorists, were largely constrained to small hotel rooms, conference rooms, and mimeograph newsletters that would reach a few hundred people. But that's about it. There wasn't much to be done with it. But now you can, set up a web page and you can launch an Instagram account and a YouTube account and so on, and you can have millions of people following your conspiracy theory. And that's, so to me, it's gotten a lot less fringy, more mainstream. Certainly, Trump mainstreamed it, not just with 2020, but all the way back into 2015, when he was still running in the primaries against other Republicans. In the first primary, Cruz won the first primary.
Yep.
And Trump said, "Oh, rigged. It was stolen."
Yep. Long history of that. Yeah.
Yeah. Same tweets, actually. The same language in the tweets. We got the voting machines are flipping the votes from Trump to Cruz, and on and on. It's just wow. Okay. And then in 2016, when he won the election, but not the popular vote, well, it was rigged. And of course, 2020, it was rigged. He even goes back to when The Amazing Race won the Emmy for the best television reality show over The Apprentice, and Trump tweeted, "Rigged. It was stolen. Everybody knows that The Apprentice is a better show." And it's just right.
So long trail.
Yeah. One of the new things about Trump's conspiracism, it's the conspiracy theory without the theory. There's no arguments or evidence presented. He just declares it to be true.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's just one word, rigged, and everybody knows what that means. And, and where's the evidence for this? Oh, it's everywhere. People are saying, what people? Oh, a lot of people.
Yep.
Right. That's the extent of the evidence. And you just can't do that. I mean, even the flat earthers, when I deal with them, they have arguments and evidence, what they consider to be evidence anyway. And the Holocaust deniers, they send me lists of reasons they believe what they believe. And, here, try to counter that, Shermer. Here's the 39 unanswered claims made by Holocaust historians that we find problematic. And so, okay, you have to roll up your sleeves and get to work to show, why they're wrong, or creationists. How do you explain this one particular thing here in nature, the eye or DNA or the bacterial flagellum or whatever? And if Darwinian natural selection can't explain it, well, therefore, creationism is true. Well, okay, so what are the answers to those problems? And we have explanations for those, and people like me and others have written books about it. But with the new conspiracism, people just say it's true. And no evidence is on offer. And so, that's harder to counter. So you have to ask, well, what would it take to change your mind? What would it take to falsify that belief? And people are just, well, nothing, because this is my tribe. So I call this tribal conspiracism. This is the conspiracy theory our tribe believes, full stop. Whether it's true or not is really irrelevant. It's just true because we said it's true, and that's what our tribe believes. Or proxy conspiracism is the second of my three-legged stool theory of conspiracism, that it's a proxy for something else, even if that particular one's not true. The QAnon Pizzagate thing with Hillary leading a secret satanic pedophile cult out of a pizzeria in Washington, D.C. I mean, if I took you there, well, one guy went there, Edgar Welch, with his gun to break up the pedophile ring, which is what you would do if you really believed it and the police weren't doing anything. But most people, I think, don't really believe it. It's just one of those kind of proxies. Well, Democrat, I don't know if that one's true, but this kind of thing Hillary would do. It's kind of thing those Democrats would do. They're conniving and cheating and immoral and evil, and we don't like them. So even if that was not true, something's bad, right?
Yeah, I mean, seems like there's never-ending excuses to buy into stuff like that when you're really desperate to believe in something. I guess that's also what I really liked about your book, because you give such a thorough outline detailing all the intangibles of being a conspiracy theorist, all the different routes you can go with the reasoning why you believe you become one. It also made me think, because you've been doing this for so long, I can't imagine what it would be like to see your expression when you saw like January 6th, for example. Thinking like for years you've been thinking about conspiracy theories and trying to debunk them and help educate the public. And then you see that happen. It's just like, what is going on? Yes.
Yeah, well, I did. I watched it live on TV like everybody else. And I thought immediately, well, this is what people do when they really believe something. Like Edgar Welch, who went to the pizza place with his gun. That is what a true believer does.
Yeah.
And so, and we have interviews with most of the people that, charged the insurrectionists that charged into the Capitol building, especially the ones that were dangerous and armed and were clearly intent on violence. When they said, why'd you go? And they said, because Trump said to go, because Trump told us it was being stolen and I believed him. And, if somebody convinced you that your country was being stolen out from under you, right beneath your nose, right? And you better do something about it or you're not going to have a country. If you really believe that, that is kind of a logical response. Yeah, we better get down there and do something about it. The analogy I make, excuse me, because let's say you're at work and your neighbor calls and says, there's something suspicious going on at your house. And you're like, what? Yeah. It looks like there's people kind of casing the joint. So you call the police and maybe they go by, they go, well, we don't see anything. And then your neighbor calls back and, hey, now there's a truck backed up into your backyard and it looks like they're hauling stuff out of your house. You're like, oh my God. And so, well, the police aren't going to do anything. I'm going there right now. I got to get my gun. I'm going to put a stop to this, right? That is kind of what you would do. Yeah. So there's a kind of a logic to it if you believe the false claim, right? So therefore, whether a conspiracy theory is true or not matters very much. Consequences are massive. It's like when I had Oliver Stone on my podcast. That didn't go that well because I didn't handle it well. I should have asked him, because he's convinced the CIA was involved and that Oswald was a patsy and so on. Well, who in the CIA did it, right? I mean, if you say, name names and when people just say, well, I'm just asking questions, or I just have a suspicion, that's not enough, right? The 9/11 truthers, well, the Bush administration did it. Who in the Bush administration? Name them. Let's convict them. Let's put them up before a grand jury and accuse them of something and see, how far that'll go in a court of law, because it won't, because you don't have any evidence for that.
Right.
So it's that kind of generic accusation or suspicion, and people believe it. And once they believe it, then it's possible for it to be dangerous.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like, from hearing about conspiracy theories just throughout my life and studying history, I mean, I get the impression that and you did a good job of talking about sort of human nature and sort of that natural instinct for people to which I guess makes them susceptible to believing in conspiracy theories. I mean, it seems like a big part of every conspiracy theory is like this underlying feeling of trying to get comfort from having control over your world by not feeling like, that you're, I guess, confused, but instead you are empowered by this conspiracy theory and this knowledge that you have. And it just seems, really disturbing, because you also, I look at it the other way, you think that these people must have, this really big fear of the world to just latch on to conspiracy theories so easily, and they're so desperate for this, I guess, feeling of comfort that it must be miserable almost to live a life like that, where you think like everyone's out to get you. It's really hard to imagine what it's like to be them, but
if you're exceptionally paranoid, yes. Most people are not that paranoid.
okay.
And so the third leg of my three-legged stool theory is, proxy conspiracism, tribal conspiracism. Third one is constructive conspiracism. That is, enough conspiracy theories turn out to be true that it pays to be a little bit paranoid, constructively paranoid, you might say, because sometimes they really are out to get you. Sometimes your relatives, when the parents die and they leave a will, and maybe your siblings can be trusted, maybe they can't, maybe they are plotting to do something. Or you're at work and there's, competition for some resources, maybe that other department is plotting to do something against your department to get the money, or some of your fellow coworkers don't like you and they're talking about you in secret. There's a lot of that happens, right?
Yeah.
So kind of coalitional conspiracism is a reality of the social world. And so I'm claiming that we evolved kind of a conspiratorial cognition for a good reason, that it pays to err on the side of assuming conspiracy theories are true when they're not, type 1 errors, false positive, versus not recognizing a real conspiracy against you, and that's a type 2 error, false negative. So again, back to signal detection theory, one kind of error is more costly than the other kind of error. Of course, you want to get it right every time, but you don't. And we make errors in our cognition. So better to err on the side of assuming the worst, just in case.
Sure.
Right. And so that I'm arguing that, in our evolutionary history, in these small bands and tribes of a couple dozen to a couple hundred individuals, and other tribes competing for resources against tribes and bands, that there was enough of kind of coalitional threat of violence or being hacked or taken advantage of, free riders and so on, in a game theory model. It pays to be a little suspicious of other people, because we know people can be selfish and they can try to game the system. So, it pays to be a little suspicious. And I think that's where we get that. So I'm arguing it's not a bug in the system. It's a feature, as computer people say. It's just built right in there for good reason.
Right. Well, I mean, that makes sense. It's, you can see how there'd be plenty of advantages to not being completely oblivious to the world around you, and assuming that everyone's got your best interests in mind. I guess I think that even I remember you mentioning this before in some video where it's like, you just can't be too skeptical where, like your brain falls out or something like that.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yes. Well, so there's a, kind of a balance there. Here, I'll read my favorite epigram from my books from Why People Believe Weird Things from Carl Sagan. This is from his lecture, The Burden of Skepticism, that I heard in 1987 when he spoke in Pasadena. Inspired me to write this book and go into skepticism. Seems to me what is called for is an exquisite balance between two conflicting needs. The most skeptical scrutiny of all hypotheses that are served up to us, and at the same time a great openness to new ideas. If you are only skeptical, then no new ideas make it through to you. You never learn anything new. You become a crotchety old person convinced that nonsense is ruling the world. There is, of course, much data to support you. On the other hand, if you're open to the point of gullibility and have not an ounce of skeptical sense in you, then you cannot distinguish useful ideas from worthless ones. If all ideas have equal validity, then you're lost, because then it seems to me no ideas have any validity at all. right? So that's true for anything, right? But especially conspiracism.
Has to be a balance. So, yeah.
Right. So where do you find it? Well, it depends on the
Yeah.
particular claim, but in general, you look for a kind of consistency of evidence that leans toward one conclusion rather than another. And does it make sense for how the world works? I have a whole kind of a baloney detection kit or conspiracy detection kit patterned after Carl's baloney detection kit in my book, saying like, what are the kinds of questions you could ask if you, here, I'll just pull it up here. If you encounter a conspiracy theory, what should you ask about it? And wait a minute. Oh, here we go. Yeah, like how many people, would need to be involved in the conspiracy theory? So the more people that have to be involved, then the less likely it's going to be true, because people are incompetent, people can't keep their mouth shut. They go to the wrong place, they get the wrong weapon, they do the wrong thing, they tell their friends, they tell their wives or girlfriends or whatever, spouses, and then they tell somebody, and before you know it, we hear about it, right? Or how many elements have to come together at just the right time. And again, the more things that have to happen, the less likely your theory is to be true, because it's hard to make things happen like that. Chaos rules the world, randomness, right? And how big a scope is the conspiracy theory? It's like, if it's world domination, we're going to take over the world. Yeah. Not likely anybody could actually do that, right? As opposed to something small like, I'm going to do some insider trading, or I'm going to cheat the regulatory system, or I'm going to cheat on my taxes, or whatever. Companies, people, do this all the time, embezzlement, and agencies that misallocate funds for personal use. This happens all the time. That's a kind of conspiracy, right? But that's more likely to be true. So if you take something like 9/11 as an inside job, well, let's just think this through for a second. How many people would it take to demolish the two largest buildings in the country, that are also, by the way, two of the most secure buildings in the world? Because Al Qaeda tried to bomb it. They did bomb it in '93 with the basement bomb.
Yeah.
And so, they were super paranoid about anybody trying to do something like that again. So, what we're told by the truthers is that, well, they went in there under the pretense of elevator repair. Come on, right? I mean, how long would it take to plant all the explosive devices that would be needed to bring those buildings down? It would be hundreds of people, and how do you get to the inside structural beams that hold the building together? You have to break through all the drywall to get there, to plant the bombs in there. Well, nobody seems to have noticed anybody in there breaking through drywall, right?
Yeah.
Again, these are secure buildings, and so you're talking probably hundreds of people at least that would be involved just in that part of the conspiracy. And not one of them wants to go on 60 Minutes and go, you're not going to believe it, I was involved, or I was married to the guy that did it, or something.
Yeah.
Or, write a tell-all book and make a fortune, go on the lecture circuit, right? And or just, I know somebody who knows somebody that was involved. We don't have any examples of that, not one. So it's not possible for all those people to pull that off and make all that happen. Not to mention, you'd have to plant the bombs in the buildings, on the floors where you would know ahead of time where the planes are going to hit. How is that possible?
Yeah.
This is impossible, right? So, I mean, and the more the more you throw in there, the more absurd it. So that's how we know it's not true. It doesn't matter how many weird little anomalies and that people come up with, because if you look at any event in life carefully enough, you'll find weird things about it, like the JFK. Sure. There's the Umbrella Man. I have a picture of the Umbrella Man in the book, where there was this guy. It was a sunny day, clear and sunny day, no chance of rain. What's this guy doing out there with an umbrella? Oh, the umbrella was a gun. And, they have diagrams of what the gun looked like, how to convert an umbrella to a gun, and so on. And that guy finally came forward like a decade after the assassination, said, well, that was me. And the umbrella was a protest sign that goes back to Kennedy's father, Joseph Kennedy, who was kind of involved with, I don't know, just the U.S. involvement in European affairs, and Neville Chamberlain was the prime minister, and he had that meeting with Hitler in 1938, where they let him have even more territory, and he came back with his umbrella, And so the umbrella became a sign of, protest against politicians who concede to evil, that kind of thing. So he didn't like Kennedy. He's out there with his umbrella protest. But, it took a long time to figure that out. Just one little anomaly, like, ooh, what's he doing there? Oh, there's something suspicious, right? Whereas if it had been the mayor of Dallas that was shot, no one would have noticed the umbrella man. No one would care,
Right.
Yes.
So,
I mean, there's something about some conspiracy. Why JFK? Well, because he's the leader of the free world, right? Most powerful man on earth. He's a good-looking guy, and everybody loved him. So that's and people like that are not supposed to die at the hands of some lone nut like Lee Harvey Oswald. But that is how it happens in an open, free society like ours, where people can slip into the nooks and crannies of life and no one notices them. A nobody like Oswald. And anyways, the same thing with Princess Diana, cause of death, drunk driving, speeding, no seatbelt. But princesses, that's how 30,000+ people a year die on American highways. But that's not how princesses are supposed to die. They're supposed to be, above all that. But so that's some psychology of belief.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's always fascinated me by how much people are willing to assume that governments are much more clever and sophisticated than they actually are. Governments historically can obviously pull off, some miraculous things. There have been conspiracies that have occurred historically, but a lot of people don't really understand also how dysfunctional government is, all the bureaucracy and all the issues governments have with doing just basic things on a regular basis. And so it's interesting to me to see that people just automatically assume the government can pull all the strings magically and thoroughly enough where no one can really catch on, except for those few conspiracy theorists who are supposedly on the ball, I guess. So
yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah. I mean, one of my favorite episodes of Joe Rogan's podcast was with Edward Snowden, and he talked about Joe loves conspiracy theories, right? So so Snowden says, let me tell you about how bureaucracies actually work when you're in the inside, right? It's just a bunch of paper pushing bureaucrats trying to keep their jobs.
Yeah.
They're not plotting to take over the world or, we're going to do this.
Yes.
Right. They're mostly just trying to concoct some motivation to keep their budget going year to year. And so the threat of terrorism and, well, we got to do this because if we don't do this, it's going to be a mushroom cloud over Washington, D.C., and the terrorists are going to take over. And so therefore you need us. And it's not like they're trying to do anything other than just keep their jobs.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, it's right. And there's so much paranoia about like, oh, if we don't do this, then, this will look bad. So we have to have documentation for every single thing, even the slightest request. I need more pencils here. You need to fill out 10 forms for more pencils. It's like,
right,
give me a break.
Right.
But so that brings me then to another thing from your book I was thinking about when it comes to, like, you were talking about how, I guess, societies and governments can sort of improve their transparency to make it so people are less likely to believe in conspiracy theories. To what extent also do you think that political polarization in society and the government plays a role in promoting conspiracy theories?
Right. So the transparency is super important for elections, as we've seen, and the claim that it was rigged is negated by the fact that the elections were very transparent. You could just go to the polling places, and there are people there. Most of them that said in these contested areas were Republicans who voted for Trump and said, well, I was there. There was no, here's how we did it. And here's the recount and whatever. The more transparency, the better, because everybody thinks there's some kind of shenanigans being done by the other side. By the way, I've been kind of pounding on Trump, but, Hillary thought there was something up with the 2016 election. And there was in a way. I mean, the Comey releasing those emails 2 weeks before. It's like, what was that about?
Sure.
Not really a conspiracy, but something pretty odd there. And then the Russian collusion, not really collusion, but they did certainly have social media bots, and they were kind of steering things as much as they could toward Trump. They preferred Trump over Hillary. That was for sure happened, even though there was no manipulation of the voting machines by Russian bots or anything like that. And then if you go back in time, whoever, in general, as a general rule, whoever loses the election thinks there was something suspicious about it. And whoever wins, previously before they won, they thought the other side's probably cheating. Then the moment they win, they go, no, never mind. It was a fair election.
That's right.
That always happens on both sides. And the only thing different about Trump is that he continued it even after he won. In 2015, he said, well, the election's going to be rigged throughout 2016. It's going to be rigged. It's going to be rigged. Well, you won. Well, it's still rigged because I got more votes than they said I did. Right? Okay, that was unusual. And so again, it's the more transparency, I think, like in corporations, like for example, the kind of conspiracy paranoia you find amongst employees about what the people at the top are doing, that can be negated by transparency, like transparency of salaries. Like at Whole Foods, my friend John Mackey is the CEO of Whole Foods. His system is pretty transparent. Everybody knows what the top people are making, and no one in the top makes more than 19 times the average worker's wage, because he doesn't like that resentment that average workers have against the people at the top that are paid 1,000 times more than they are, like in the case of CEOs that are paid tens of millions of dollars a year, and are they really worth it? And it feels, if I can't see what's going on and how the system works, it feels like there could be some cheating going on. And in doping in sports, this happens, and the transparency is the key to ending it. Because if athletes just think that other athletes are doping or doing something to gain a tiny little advantage, in a way, in a game theoretic way, they have to do it to counter it, just in case, or else you're going to lose. And so that sets up an arms race. And the solution is transparency. Just everybody gets tested. We know that the other people are not doping, therefore you don't have to dope. But you have to know that that's true.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I assume that there are many things that could happen but aren't happening because of, each party would love to have as much control as possible. People have talked about doing things to make elections, more balanced and having open primaries, or all these different little political reforms that can make the process more open, and obviously financial transparency when it comes to campaigns and donations. So there's certainly lots of things that can be done. And I guess my other question is, like, what do you think about political polarization and that connection to conspiracy theories? Do you think that helps like breed conspiracy theories by having such a tense
it makes
situation?
it worse. Yeah, for sure. A couple tracks going on at the same time over the last 25 years, the rise of conservative talk radio, people like Rush Limbaugh, and then Fox News on that side, and then cable TV, MSNBC on the other side, and so on. That what's happened is that the number of people self-identifying as center or center left, center right has shrunk. And the number of people that have self-identified as far right or far left have increased. So you kind of get this double hump curve now, more than the usual bell curve. And then on top of that, it's that this kind of sense that the other side is not just disagreeing with me. We have our differences. You think the tax rate should be this. I think it should be that. We'll argue it and have an election. Now it's like you're not just wrong. You're not just disagreeing with me. You're wrong, and not just wrong, but evil. Right? You're out to destroy the country. Again, back to Trump saying they're stealing the election. Get down there. In a way, each side is saying they hate America. They're trying to destroy America. And so it's like, if you really believe that, then you can't socialize with somebody in the other party. I mean, why would you do that? Yeah. I mean, these are bad people. Why would you socialize with somebody who's bad?
Yeah, it very much gets to the territory that you can see in a lot of authoritarian countries around the world, where basically, if you're not for this dictator, then you are the enemy, and we should get rid of you. So kind of a dangerous path to go towards when you get this really strong personality cults around political figures.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm curious then, you talked about in your book about, how to talk to a conspiracy theorist. So what would you say is the success rate from your experience in terms of changing someone's mind?
Well, I don't have good data on that other than just anecdotal. I mean, I do hear from a lot of people that change their minds about various things that
Okay.
I've
So
written
there's some
about.
hope. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, people do change their mind. This idea that people never change their minds, or they can't be reasoned out of things they didn't reason their way to in the first place. Yes, they can. I do it
Yeah.
all the time. Lots of people do. And there is research on this showing, it's not enough to just show the, say, evidence for climate change, anthropogenic global warming, let's say. You got to do more than that, but you do have to have the facts. That's important.
Right.
And the counter arguments, like, well, maybe it's sunspot activity. No, actually, here's why we know it's not sunspot activity that's causing the rise of temperatures. Oh, okay. But you also have to address the underlying issues that really concern the person. Let's say it's a climate denier in this case. When I talk to them, I find pretty soon we're talking about free market capitalism and the American way of business. And what has that got to do with CO2 gases and glacier melting? But for them, it's all part of this conspiracy of liberals to destroy America, or destroy American capitalism, or impose socialism, maybe even communism, through this threat of climate change. So we have to pass legislation and control industry. And so this is what they're really concerned about. The example I use of creationists, if you give a Christian creationist a choice between Darwin and Jesus, they're not picking Darwin, right? So you got to take Jesus off the table. Just say, look, you can have Christianity, believe in God, the soul, the afterlife, whatever you want, but evolution is still a good science, and here's how we know it's true, and you can accept it too, and keep your religious beliefs. Oh, okay. Then they're more likely to accept it, right? So people don't want to give up some foundational belief over some little thing that they don't really care about. I mean, climate science, who knows very much about that? Or vaccines. I mean, what do I know? I'm not an epidemiologist. I don't study public health. I have to kind of depend on the experts who check each other and hope they get it right most of the time. And most of the time they do, but people don't trust that anymore. So the institution of science in general, and then scientists and scientific organizations, has plummeted in recent decades.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think you made a lot of good points there, because I always kind of felt like I grew up in Kansas, so right in the heart of the Bible Belt, and the town I grew up, there was like a church on every block, just a different church.
Right.
And went to a Catholic school for college, even though I'm not Catholic. So I always kind of felt like, though, when it comes to like religious beliefs, where it's really not so much that things like evolution are bad, but more so that, is it going to contradict my faith in God? And if it's compatible, then it's like, oh, well, it's not a big deal. It's just, people are afraid because it's such a part of their identity. And so, yeah, that's a really interesting aspect. I guess also it just kind of depends on the person. How deeply ingrained is someone's, belief in something, whether it's conspiracy theory or something else. You might need more time than with that person to convince them to ease up a little bit and open up to alternative ideas. But
yeah, don't expect change to happen right there in front of you, right?
Yeah.
You just plant a seed of doubt about their beliefs. Just ask some questions like, well, how do you know that's true? What's the source of your evidence for that? What evidence do you have? And how do you know that person is right or that source is right? What would it take to change your mind?
Yeah.
What would it take to falsify that belief? I mean, it may be true. You might be right, but maybe not. How can you tell? Just throw it back to them, and usually they haven't really thought of it like that.
Yeah.
Most people don't think counterfactually, like, I might be wrong. What would it take for me to change my mind? That's unusual, right? The idea of falsifying hypotheses is fairly new. It's kind of a scientific learned thing. Well, this is something we have to do to get around this problem of cognitive biases. And so, people don't naturally try to falsify their beliefs. So you have to kind of nudge them in that direction without telling them they're idiots or they're Hitler.
Right. Yeah. Not going to go well.
No.
Yeah, that's usually not the best way to convert someone to being more open-minded about things.
Exactly.
What role do you think then the education should have when it comes to preventing conspiracy theories? Do you think there should be, greater critical thinking taught in schools across the United States?
Yes, supposedly it is. I mean, everybody says we teach critical thinking. I don't think they really do very much, though. I mean, like, I teach a course at Chapman University, Skepticism 101, in which I really teach them how to think about things, not what to think, although I give them plenty of facts about different claims, but how to think about some claim 10 years from now that I can't even imagine what it could be that my students will encounter. And they go, oh, yeah, we got to apply this principle or that principle. And, so I would like to see, if we want to speak more broadly about educational reform, when I was in school, I'd take, algebra, geometry, and then pre-algebra, algebra, then pre-calculus and all that, stuff I never used. And, I wasn't going into STEM fields, and which would be useful to have those fields. But how about a course in statistics and probabilities? How should you reason in a Bayesian way? How should I assign probabilities to different claims, and then how to think about those different probabilities, even if I can't put specific numbers in them, just the principles behind it, or just the kind of logic and rationality, empiricism, the tools of science. And it doesn't have to be boring. I mean, my class is just filled with stuff like Bigfoot and the Loch Ness Monster and ESP and psychics and how to talk to the dead and, conspiracy theories and cults. Last night, we had 2 talks on cults and Scientology. And, students are just fascinated by this. And what's underneath it is, all the boring philosophy of science and logic and rationality. And but I don't give them that up front. I give them the claim, like, oh, this is super interesting. Are there aliens out there? Are UFOs real? How should we think about that claim? And then you can apply those kind of tools. And students are never taught that. They've never heard these kinds of things, which is what we do, right? I mean, the whole skeptical movement, this is what we do, is, how to think about any claim that somebody makes.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like something, and I guess proof from just your class, it's something that people would be so fascinated by, to have these conversations in the classroom, because students hear about this stuff all the time outside the classroom in their regular life. You turn on the History Channel, it's just filled with, one crazy thing after another.
Yeah.
But people see this, and so bringing it into the classroom where they can learn about it, I feel like, it would be a huge benefit to society. So, now, how much progress do you think the skeptic movement has made since you first got involved in it?
It's hard to measure that, because polls like Gallup poll and Pew poll, and we do our own Skeptic Research Center polls, but that's pretty new. The data is not consistent over a long decades, say decadal level comparisons, like say on same-sex marriage. They've asked the question the same way pretty much for 75 years. And so you can see the trends.
Yeah.
Polling about the paranormal is all over the board. Pollsters don't know much about it, so they'll mix things up and think of like belief in UFOs as a kind of a paranormal belief. It's not paranormal. It's perfectly normal.
Right.
These are natural beings out there that evolved on some other planet and they came here. That's not the same as ESP, right? So people mix it up and they ask the questions in different ways. Do you think it's possible? Yeah, I guess so. Or, that's different than, do you think aliens have actually come here? Well, that's a different kind of question.
Sure.
Anything is possible. I'm not willing to put 100% or 0% on any claim, but I am willing to say it's a 99% probability aliens have not come here, and these things we're calling UFOs represent something else. But I'm not going to assign a 0 to it, because I could be wrong. Even that as a tool of thinking is good. But people, again, are not taught that. It's very binary. So that kind of thing, I think, is the sort of thing we may be having an effect on. It's hard to say. Again, I think if you take the long view, though, if you say enlightenment, reason, and rationality in science have had a massive effect over the last 300 years.
Yeah.
I mean, pretty much nobody believes in the witch theory of causality, as I call it. That diseases and plagues and accidents and tsunamis and stuff are caused by demons. And the cause of that is, women cavorting with these demons in the middle of the night. Nobody, well, almost nobody today believes that, at least not in the Western world. Yeah. And, so we debunked all that. Now we have meteorology to explain weather events. And, we have the germ theory of disease to explain plagues, and things like that have been displaced. So science as a whole, one reason there's pseudoscience is because science is so dominant and powerful an institution that everybody wants to be like that. So
Yeah.
so-called pseudoscientists string together sciencey sounding words and sentences that make it sound like that's what they're doing.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, definitely we're doing better historically speaking than everyone else you pretty much throughout history when it comes to beliefs. And we still have plenty of issues, but making progress, it seems, generally. So,
I think so.
yeah, absolutely. Well, yeah, I mean, and you keep producing books like this, it can't hurt. So it's always good. Well, before I let you go, I just want to thank you so much for coming on and sharing all your knowledge. And I've always found that you've had really balanced views about all sorts of things, whether it's when it comes to supernatural beliefs or conspiracy theories or politics. So really, really glad to see you continuing to crank out new stuff for people. I think it's really, really great. So thank you so much.
Yeah,
and
thank you.
for anyone listening,
By the way, this
yes.
is so this says conspiracy in the pattern, although other people have found that there's also CIA and Soros, George Soros, Soros, right? And then I'm getting people saying to me, "Oh no, I found this word in there. I found this word."
Oh my God!
Perfectly captures the problem, right?
Yeah. So, wow. Okay. So your book cover has already drawn new conspiracy theories.
That's right.
So, perfect.
I'm sending a message.
That's
secretly.
Right. That's right. Just when we thought we were making progress, we just created a new monster. Yeah. Yeah, that's right. Well, if you're listening to this, feel free to check out more of Dr. Michael Shermer's stuff and buy his new book, Conspiracy. And hopefully don't look too hard into the cover and come up with a new conspiracy theory. So, all right. Well, thanks so much.